In 1948, white communities could no longer legally prevent homeowners from selling property to people of color because 6 justices on the United States Supreme Court ruled that racial covenants were unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. And in 1948, the armed forces were integrated because President Harry Truman issued an executive order desegregating the military. Our third story, civil rights have been achieved in this country not because popular opinion shifted, but because of a handful of people who were in a position to do something and did it. So why can't President Obama do that now and repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell? Obama's decision to allow gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military now on hold as the Pentagon undergoes a year-long review, which includes asking some 400,000 Americans in uniform how they feel about repealing the policy. But this isn't the first time the Pentagon has surveyed the troops. Newly released documents published exclusively by Wonk Room show that in 1942, white members of the armed forces overwhelmingly believed that white and black troops should be segregated. President Truman integrated the military anyway. A few years later, the Pentagon asked white Christian enlisted forces what they thought about Jews. 86% of those surveyed agreed with the statement that there is nothing good about Jews. 61% in agreement that you can always tell a Jew by the way he looks. While a bare majority of 51% agreed that Jews are the biggest gold bricks in the army. To a military infested with those opinions, on July 26, 1948, President Truman issued Executive Order 9981 establishing equality of treatment and opportunity in the armed services anyway. Gay men and women are already serving alongside other troops in the U.S. military. They just aren't doing it openly. Except for Lieutenant Dan Choi, who until yesterday, when he came out on the Rachel Maddow show in March 2009, he then kept serving as a soldier for a year and a half until he was fired yesterday. Last night, the Iraq War veteran spoke to Rachel again about how his infantry unit treated him.
There's no need for a survey. There's no need for a poll. There's no need for people to put up shower curtains because they're afraid of what might happen. I've been serving for 17 months quite openly, and I've seen nothing but positive impact when you tell people around you, people who you work with, the truth about who you are. There's nothing but an increase in unit cohesion, in teamwork, in trust. Honesty is the fabric, the foundation of all of that.
Still lots to talk about with syndicated columnist Dan Savage about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He's also the editorial director for The Stranger, a Seattle news weekly. Dan, Lieutenant Choi makes it clear that his infantry unit has advanced since the attitudes of 1948, but the Pentagon still made the decision to fire him after thinking about it for a year and a half. What were they thinking about for a year and a half?
I don't know what they were thinking about, but I know what they were thinking like. The Pentagon, the U.S. Senate, the people who run the armed forces, they're thinking like old men. And the people who serve with Dan Choi are thinking like young people. One of the things that distinguishes younger generations from the older generations is homophobia. And people are much more homophobic. The older people are much more homophobic than younger people, and the enlisted people, the troops that Dan served with, are younger people. And so what you really have here is the political class, the Senate, the guys who run the Pentagon, the women who run the Pentagon, projecting onto younger troops their own hang-ups, their own homophobia. And younger people are past it on this issue, on same-sex marriage, on Employment Non-Discrimination Act. Young people embrace full equality for gays and lesbians. Old people have a problem with it, and that's what you're seeing here now.
If President Obama and Defense Secretary Gates have decided that gays and lesbians are going to serve and cannot be kicked out because of that, shouldn't that just be the end of the discussion? I mean, the U.S. military takes orders. They don't vote on what to do in the military.
Well, Congress has to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell because it's a law. In the meantime, the president can issue a stop-loss order that prevents any further discharges under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. What's interesting, I think, about the policy and why I think a stop-loss order should be issued immediately is it creates a blackmail risk. It creates a security risk. Every person who's gay or lesbian and currently in the Army and hiding it, their career is at risk if they are outed. That person, if somebody should get the drop on them and threaten to expose them, is a security risk, and therefore we should get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell if we're serious about protecting ourselves and protecting our country.
What do you think the rationale is, the current rationale behind commissioning surveys? I mean, clearly, if you were going to go by the 1948 surveys, you wouldn't have Jews in the military at that time. What help could the survey possibly be?
Well, if we went by surveys of the American people, we would never have made any progress at all. Broad majorities of the American people have supported the internment of the Japanese, denying the vote to women. Broad majorities of the American people are wrong so often that when a broad majority of the American people are in agreement about something, we should give it a second look. What's going on with the survey, though, is if Barack Obama were a white Republican, he could Nixon in China this and just end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The hit on the Democrats from the right wing, from the Republicans, always is that the Democrats are insufficiently deferential to and respectful of the military. So this process has to be dragged out, lest the Democratic president, the Democratic majorities in Congress are accused of not deferring to the military. Ironically, it creates the impression, though, also harmful to the Democrats, that the president is weak and can't just make this decision, that he can't treat this issue the same way that he treated General McChrystal. And he fired him. He didn't hesitate. And he shouldn't hesitate to end the enforcement of Don't Ask, Don't Tell while we wait for the results of this survey.
Do you think this decision is politically and in other ways easier than the 1948 decision to integrate the military? Because gay men and lesbians are already serving in the military.
They are, and what's really indicative of how politically easy, low-hanging fruit, if I can use that expression in a conversation like this, broad majorities of Americans support the immediate repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Liberals, conservatives, independents, Tea Partiers, this is a no-brainer politically, no risk, no brainer, and the president should have done it the day after he was sworn in, issued that stop-loss order while Congress worked on a formal repeal of the law.
Syndicated columnist Dan Savage, also of The Stranger. Thanks for your time tonight, Dan.
Thank you.